Hello! I would like to talk to you about my presentation I'd like to submit for JupyterCon. The title is Jupyterhub, Singularity, and GPU. In particular, I want to cover two things. What is the presentation and why does it matter? So what is this presentation? Presentation is the history of Jupyterhub at RIT. I am the main architect of the deployment, and it started out as a experiment I was doing in one of my classes, and it ended up being a campus-wide deployment where students and faculty use it for classes and research and personal projects and wherever else they need to use it. Some of the highlights I have is our move from Docker to Singularity. When we started out the project, I was copying some of the previous work done that others had done, and a lot of the sysadmins didn't like the idea of using Docker. They felt that running it as a daemon process was a security vulnerability, so they gave me that my own VM and I ran my deployment in that, and it turns out that they were right because our deployment got added to a botnet. So when we redesigned the system, we used Singularity instead of Docker, and Singularity is an interesting container platform as it's rootless. It doesn't require root, it doesn't require sudo to run the images. All the images are flat files, so you can transfer them over existing programs, existing protocols, and you can use the existing scheduler, you can use the existing resources to run it because it's just a program that runs on whatever computer you want. Some of the pitfalls that we encountered was resource exhaustion. So when a lot of students decide to do some work at the same time, for example, when an assignment is coming up, our scheduler doesn't quite know how to deal with that, so we're trying to figure out how to solve that problem. Spawners and errors. A lot of times I would get emails for things where people were saying the system was down, but it turned out that there was a very simple thing that they had to do to solve the problem, and being able to report that would be better. And keeping the users in mind when designing some of the services and some of the infrastructure, because it's very easy to assume that people know what's going on underneath, and because of that, they know how to use the system. But that's not always the case. Now, why does this matter? In particular, this deployment is interesting because it's different than everything else I've seen. I've seen a lot of deployments where they'll use batch spawner, where they have a cluster and they just spawn processes on it. They'll use Jupyter on that, but it's kind of limited because you can't use any software outside of what you support on the cluster. So, for example, at RIT we do not support TensorFlow. But we do support TensorFlow running inside the container, and because now we run Jupyter inside the container, we can support TensorFlow notebooks. A lot of newer deployments are using Docker, in particular Kubernetes. In fact, the 0 to Jupyterhub is using Kubernetes to do all the orchestration. But a lot of institutions, a lot of universities can't switch over from their existing infrastructure. They spent millions of dollars, they have a lot of software, a lot of systems invested into this, so they can't just get up and move over, and they don't really want to make a new cluster using this new infrastructure. So my deployment and my setup is able to use all the existing resources. We don't have to make a new cluster. If you want to expand it, you just add existing resources to your cluster, and we are able to support that. Thank you for your consideration.